You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protein Machining, and this week I am very happy to welcome, you might know him as Job Shopper TN, the king of the Yahoos, Patrick McClintock. How's it going, Pat?
I'm doing good, Dylan. How are you?
I'm doing well, yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad we can make it work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So for those who don't know who you are and what you do, give us the rundown.
Sure. So I'm a machinist at a company called RBSA Industrial in Sweetwater, Tennessee. I mainly program and run tooling for CNC tube bending machines. So we make all the dies, all the different kinds of dies and other components that go with these machines. We also tend to refurbish and restore old CNC benders that people send to us. So, there's all kinds of things that come up with that, adapters and motor adapters and all kinds of things with that. It's very interesting. My background is really in job shop machining. That's why I have the username that I do. And then coming here and doing more of like, what would you call it? I guess like an internal work. It's definitely been an interesting change.
Yeah, I'm sure there's benefits and drawbacks. I mean, it's probably nice to just walk over to the engineer and be like, hey, I can't do this. Like, this is just not possible. But also it means that they probably want it even faster than, a normal job shop.
Right. One of the nice things is for the most part, our engineer isn't really a machinist as well. So he doesn't really design anything that's, unmachinable. And most everything we do is similar, right? It's similar but different. From one bend die to the next or whatever, it's going to be the same concept. It's just based on size and whatever the customer needs. So it certainly helps to have sort of a short pipeline between the two.
Yeah, totally. So let's get into your backstory. How did you get to where you are now? Where does your journey into manufacturing start?
All right. Buckle up. It's going to be a long one. So what I always like to tell people as far as why I got into machining is I didn't want to work at Walmart. And I say that half ironically because really in this area in rural Tennessee, there's really not a lot of good opportunities for people that don't have like an education. You're looking at factory jobs that don't treat you well, or menial jobs at restaurants and things like that. So to really get the full story, we've got to go back about 30 years before I got into machining, when my father worked at a factory in Pennsylvania. And he had kind of like a machining adjacent job, and he got to know some machinists they worked with. And I guess they made a good impression on him. So he kind of carried that with him. And then 30 years later, in 2012, when I was 18, we were trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do to make something of myself in this area where there's not really a lot of good places you can just walk into and make a career out of. So, after working with him, doing like DIY home improvement stuff, he felt like machining was a good suit for me. So we looked around and we found a state-run tech school that was about 25 minutes away. Tennessee's got a pretty decent program when it comes to like post high school education. They have a whole series of technical colleges throughout the state. And so I went there. I originally actually wanted to go in for welding because it was just interesting to me. I'd seen it on TV. That really was about the only experience I had with it. But I checked out the machining course, met the instructor, signed up for it. And then January 2013 is when I started that program. That was the first time I'd ever touched a machine tool or ran one or looked at one or anything. And I just fell in love with it. I think the third day I was there, I got my hands on a engine lathe. And even though I had no idea what I was doing, I had the bare minimum just to get started and not immediately kill myself.
Right.
I loved it. So, the program is intended to be a 20-month program.
Okay.
Most people, matter of fact, none of the people that I started with, I started that with, I think, four other classmates. And then there were, 15 others that had started previously.
That's still small. That's great.
Yeah, they keep it around 20, and truth be told, even that can be a lot. Just depends on the group of kids that they have. Kids, listen to me.
Well, I'm sure you felt like, or looking back, you feel like you were a kid at that point. It's a fair assertion. I know when I went to tech school as well, looking back, I'm like, oh, that young, dumb kid.
Yeah. How old are you, Dylan?
33.
Okay, I'm 31. So we're almost the same age there. So I was the only one to actually go the whole course just because it mattered to me. I like to do things 100%. So I graduated in August 2014. Had some of the highest marks that, a student has had come through that class. And I got out at a horrible time because I had a horrible time finding a job.
So real quick before we go on, describe the program, because I think that, we all use the term like tech school or vocational school, but you look at machining programs across the country and it could be, a couple engine lathes and a Bridgeport in a room versus, I've seen tech schools where they're like DMG, DMU 50s and all kind of crazy 5-axis stuff. So like what did the program consist of for you?
Sure. So it's changed since then, but at the time, it really was a manual machining oriented class because the instructor's background was manual machining, which was not ideal. My instructor was great, don't get me wrong. But he definitely had some limitations on the CNC CAD CAM side. So we had, good grief, I think we had 7 or 8 manual engine lathes. We had 7 or 8 manual Bridgeport or Bridgeport clones. Had a couple of manual surface grinders, a tool grinder that no one knew how to use, some band saws. And then as far as CNC equipment, we had, school at that time had Mastercam X6. And unfortunately, they only had 1 or 2 computers that could run it.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. It started with 2, and then I think somebody screwed 1 up, so we had 1.
That's not a great learning environment for Mastercam. You really need some hands-on with that.
Absolutely. And like I say, the poor instructor, he actually went through a course for Mastercam, and he still struggled with it. It just, it just wasn't his strong suit. And then they had a Haas VF1 and a Haas TL1 as their CNC machines. And essentially, the program essentially went something like this. You would start, you'd do some book work first few days, and then you would kind of get a once over on a machine. You might start on a mill, start on a lathe, whichever. It was not a traditional program, and they probably don't do this anymore, but like, you've heard stories of people starting out with a block of metal and a file. Right. Or laying stuff out with Dicom and making things on a drill press, that kind of thing. It wasn't anything like that. We had a textbook. It was a pretty decent textbook, and it actually covered a lot of the old school regrinding drills. You and Zap were talking about this on the last episode. And, a lot of old timey stuff that I ate it up, but hardly ever got the chance to apply it. And then most of everybody went through the program. They did all their mill parts. So you had 7 or 8 mill parts to do that were like, 100% mill parts. There was like 6 or 7 lathe parts. And then you had 5 or 6 parts that used both. You might start on the lathe and then go to the mill or whatever. You didn't really have a lot of guidelines, but ideally you would get through all those projects and a lot of book work, safety type stuff, that kind of thing in probably your first 2 trimesters. So, 8 months. At that point, by the time you get into your 3rd trimester, you should be moving on to learning a little bit of Mastercam, learning how to operate the CNC machines, that kind of thing. On that end, I mean, it was rough simply because I was learning from another student.
Mm.
And again, I can't fault my instructor that much, just because it wasn't his element. And it's hard for a tech school to attract like someone with like current up-to-date knowledge of machining that has worked in a shop, because they just don't pay as well.
Right.
Benefits are great. I mean, my first boss at the first shop I worked at actually had been a teacher. Then he opened his own shop. Then he came to work there. He went back to the school as an instructor for the last few years. And he told me, it's great to be able to have so much time off, because I think he worked like 32 hours a week, and they got a lot of time off in between trimesters and stuff. Health insurance is good because it's a government position.
Right.
But, if he worked with his experience at a shop, he'd make a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, see, I already went and got rabbit trailed. So, ideally, for the most of the people that went through that course, by the third or fourth trimester, they were up and out into a job, because that really is what the school's after, is getting people into a job. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily maintaining the job, but getting them into one.
Do they help you find a job?
Usually they do. And they did try to help me find a job. The difficulty was it just wasn't a good time. Like, 6 months before I graduated, there were some job opportunities, and there were some guys that took those opportunities. Like you could get the opportunity to do what they called a co-op, where you go to school like 1 or 2 days a week, and then you work 2 or 3 days a week, and it counts towards your schooling. Worked out great for a lot of people. I just wanted to, go through the program 100% of the way. So by the time I graduated, I went to an interview at a place down in Cleveland, Tennessee. The instructor went with me, took me through the shop, whatever. And we got down to the negotiation as far as like money. Not that I was expecting anything crazy, but one fault I feel like on the school's part was they tell you, when you graduate, you're going to just kind of waltz into a $18 to $20 an hour job. Mind you, back in 2013, that was not bad money back then, especially here. The offer that I got from that shop was for 10.
Ooh.
And, that hurt a little bit, because it's like, McDonald's is paying 8 or 9. I went through all this schooling, and I'm going to.
Right.
So that was a little tough. So I declined that. And the school reached out to me a couple of times to try to get me in some other places, and a lot of them just were not good fits. Like the main one I remember, they got me into they sent me to interview at a place that needed like a tool and die type person. They wanted like an apprentice. And they didn't tell me until about halfway through the interview that what their plan was they wanted to send me up to, I think, Michigan or Wisconsin for like 6 months for training.
Oh, wow.
Right. And I assume that's where I assume that's where the headquarters is. And then I would come back down here to work at this place. And, if somebody would have told me that ahead of time, I'd have been like, no, sorry, that ain't it. Because especially at that time, I mean, that would not have worked for a lot of reasons. So I was a little frustrated at the time. Now, I'll back up just a little bit to talk about how I got into my first job, which I had for 10 and a half years.
That was your last job?
Correct.
Then too.
My previous job, yes.
Yeah.
So I think I had been at the school for almost a year. It was close to Christmas time. And this older man came down to the school, and I knew about him. His name was Buddy Gallion. Everybody called him Buddy. He came down to the school, and I guess the instructor taught talked to him quite a bit. They were involved with the school. He still owns a shop called Gallion Manufacturing, and it's been in business for 41 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah, he started it in 1984. So he's always been involved with the school, and he was looking for a couple new employees. And the instructor talked me up, and Mr. Gallion actually pulled me aside and sat down and talked to me about, hey, would you be interested in coming to work for us? And I thought about it, and I turned him down. I just wasn't ready to leave school yet. Probably because I didn't have to, right? It was a comfort thing.
Right.
And I was really enjoying school. But yeah, I turned them down. 3 months later, the instructor gathers 5 of us up and says, hey, Gallion's just lost a few people, and they're looking to hire 3 or 4 people at one time.
Wow.
Are any of you guys interested in going up there? And I was like, sure. Because I had toured the place a year prior, I think. Just, every now and then the school would take students out to different shops to show them what an actual shop looked like. So I went up there and they, talked about, what we'd be doing and stuff like that. And they called us all up there again to, iron out details, and I declined it again. Just wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am in September of 2014. I'd been out of school for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I guess. Didn't have a job. That's stressful. My parents were a little bit not disappointed in me. They were just concerned, thinking, wow, we went through all this time and everything, and he can't get a job in this area, So if I'm not mistaken, I think I actually handwrote a letter to Mr. Gallion, and I explained what was happening. And I got a call from them the next day. Said, hey, let's come talk. So I sat down with his son, who's the CEO of the company, and their shop manager, and we ironed some stuff out, and I started the next week.
Wow.
And, I'm still grateful to them. I really am for being that patient with everything, because it certainly had its ups and downs, but like the next, 10 and a half years of my life was definitely something that I wouldn't change, I don't think. So.
Yeah. So talk to me about, growing your skills. I think I'd love to touch on also starting your Instagram and how you've grown it. You are probably one of the larger Insta Machinist pages.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of rare to look at any of the other Insta Machinists and see tens of thousands of followers. So,
right.
How did you start growing your skills there? What did they start you at? How did you start finding ways to learn to program and make all these parts? Let's go through all that.
Yep, you got it, man. So when I started, it's funny. I don't think they even really had a position for me. I think they just, I don't know. They had a feeling the Gallion family thought it was like divine providence. They're very religious people. And so I basically got in there, and they put me with this fellow named Wayne. And he basically taught me how a professional sets up and runs a CNC mill. So this shop, I'll briefly describe the shop. They had at that time 5 or 6 CNC mills. It's all Haas, 4 CNC lathes, all Haas. Anything from, they had I'll run through it. They had a Touring mill, which was old, VF1, VF2, VF3, VF4 SS. And then the big one was the GR510.
Oh, wow.
That thing was pretty cool. I mean, it was wimpy,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just cool to see a machine that big.
Just rare to see them too.
Yeah.
I don't think Haas sells many of them.
No. And then they had, I think their newest machine at that time was a TL2. and then they had an SL20, an SL30. I guess that's all the CNC lathes they had, and then a bunch of manual stuff because the owner, very old school. He started machining in the 1960s. Still does it today.
Wow.
Yeah. And, he learned the old school way, manual, grinding, high precision stuff at Oak Ridge National Lab.
Oh, cool.
He's got a very interesting career. So anyway, so I started learning how to set up CNC mills the right way because school did not teach me the right way. And I did that for a little while, got a little bit used to, running parts that the programmer had programmed, got ready, reading setup sheets, stuff like that. And I think after about a month, they decided to put me with their main lathe guy. And so while they programmed all the mill stuff with a solid cam, all their lathe stuff was done right at the control via G code. So I got a crash course in hand coding lathes. And the guy that taught me was good at it. I got to say, he was good at it. So I learned a little bit about that, mainly on the TL2, but it's adaptable to the SLs as well. Mm-hmm. After about 2.5 months of that, and I bounced back and forth a little bit. I did a little bit of manual machining. I did a little bit of, running CNC mills, running the TL2. That guy left, and I was left as the most experienced lathe guy in the shop at, 4 months of experience.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah, what you said. But I got to say, what's the expression, coal becomes a diamond through pressure, something like that. I'm not going to say I'm a diamond by any means. But, it was basically, do or die. And I did it. I had to do a lot of research at home. I had to do a lot of research outside of work, looking at stuff online, there while I could. But I figured it out. And there was a lot of crazy jobs that came through there that I programmed by hand, set up for other people. I did rely on, at that time, they had 2 or 3 manual machinists there. And one of them was a very good lathe man. And so even though I guess you could say there's a language barrier between CNC and a manual operation, what you're actually trying to accomplish is the same thing. So there's
right. You could ask him about strategies and where to remove material, stuff like that.
Oh yeah. And I asked him a lot of stuff about just anytime a new job come up, and he was always willing to help. But one thing I really enjoyed and I tried to follow is nobody there ever had a problem sharing their information. And that's very helpful. I don't care for the people that want to gatekeep, machining. It's not a fan.
One for such an old shop, that's not what you would expect.
Not at all.
Because I've worked in my first job, there was definitely some gatekeeping. Once they warmed up to you, maybe they'd start trickling you information, but for the most part, there was still this weird competitive nature. It's we're all on the same team. We all have to make parts for the same company. Why are we doing this? Exactly.
And that team aspect, I think, is what can get lost. And I think it's starting to kind of go away, as the older generations retire. But I say that even with Mr. Gallion, he was in his mid-70s at that time. He didn't care a bit to teach you anything, even if half the time it just went completely over your head, because he's way off in outer space here, on some
right.
high-end thing. So I did that for about a year. Let me consult my notes real quick. I actually went through and wrote a timeline because I was having a hard time recalling everything because it's been a while.
Do you think that he was so willing to share and kind of created that culture because of Oak Ridge and because he was in a research setting and an education setting from the beginning?
Somewhat. I don't think it's necessarily because of the environment, but so much when he started working there, he went through an apprenticeship program, and then he started at the Y12 facility. He was the youngest guy in the shop by like 15 years, and so there at that time there was a lot of, I keep saying the word gatekeeping. People throw that around, but that's what it is. They didn't really want to help you with anything, especially since you're a young buck just coming in. You got to prove yourself. And I think that stuck with him. And instead of taking the approach that a lot of old timers do and being like, well, I went through that, so you do too. He kind of went the other way around. And that I'm thankful for that.
Definitely.
A lot of people could definitely take that lesson. So about a year after I started doing the lathe work, the company was getting bigger. At that time, they were probably getting into the 30s of employees. The machine shop was like 15. They had and still have a huge fabrication division. And one of the things I started to get concerned about was the programmer at that time was not just the programmer. He was also trying to be the shop manager. And that's really difficult when you've got, you're having a program for everybody other than the lathe work. But it was a mill heavy shop, so that didn't really help much. And also manage everything and deal with the people up above and all that garbage. So they started to look at, okay, can we get a couple guys that can sort of fill in? Maybe we can get a second computer, and when they need to, they can program for themselves, if nothing else. So they took me and the guy that I started learning millwork from and kind of put us with the programmer, I think from like 5 to 7 every morning before everybody else would get there. We would get some lessons in how to model basic stuff in SolidWorks, how to put it in SolidCam and do some basic tool paths on it, just enough to get started. And that actually helped me a lot because I started using it for turning, because we started getting into some more complex turning with a lot of, profile, funny shaped parts that, you could figure it out how to do it with G code, but why?
Right.
So they ended up buying the turning module, and I started using SolidCam for that. And then there's a little bit of, you learn the lingo for that. You can transfer it over to mills easy enough. And that was a good thing because I think it was early 2016. The programmer's wife suddenly passed away.
Oh no.
She was in her 30s.
Oh, geez.
It's terrible. And so he basically just had to up and leave and deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
He was gone for about a week. I'm surprised it wasn't more. And somebody had to step up to program, because you got one programmer for 8 to 10 operators. You don't have a backlog of programs, especially when you're doing piecework.
Right.
So guess who had to fill that spot in? This guy.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely had some forward thought there training you guys up.
Absolutely.
Real quick, before we go on, I want to talk, how did you get them to buy the lathe module? I mean, it sounds like they weren't so quick to invest in stuff. And so especially as a new programmer to this software who had never used it, how do you go about justifying to bosses like that? Like, hey, can you buy this module?
I wish I had a good answer for you. The other programmer was really the one that pushed for that. And I think it was a control and consistency thing, because there was so many times where, we didn't get repeat work a lot, but we did occasionally. And if I went back and tried to use a program that someone else wrote, I mean, it's so hard to just read through it and figure out what they were doing, because there wasn't any paperwork with it. There wasn't, notes were rough. There's a lot of shorthand.
Right.
And I think at the same time, it did get into, we were doing more complex turning. If you're doing stuff where it's like a bushing or, just a stepped shaft or something like that, whatever. But when you get into stuff that's got, radiuses and shapes and tapers and stuff like that, it is way more efficient. And the irony is the programmer was very much a mill guy. And I don't want to say I was teaching him stuff about lathes, but we had to work together when he started doing lathe programming. And then I kind of took it over from him.
Right.
So
then he had this leave of absence and you started jumping in on the mills as well.
Exactly. And it was scary. It really was, because I had, like I said, 5 or 6 people that were depending on me to get them work to do. And, like I say, there wasn't any backlog. At that time, it was very much a short run piecework job shop. So everything was quantity 1, 2, and stuff that might take as long to program as it did to actually machine. So, and then when you got one programmer and 5, 6 operators, that don't add up. So, but to their credit, they also were very understanding that, hey, this guy hasn't done much mill programming. So, if there's some guys that are kind of standing around, so be it, And they actually gave me a little salary increase for that week too, which was nice.
Oh, good. That's really nice.
Because obviously I stepped way outside my station.
Yeah, seriously.
So the other programmer came back. I really think his wife passing away had like lasting effects on him, and he
especially after a week, how could it not?
Absolutely. He left after, I don't know, 5 or 6 months probably. I think it was like mid to late 2016 when he left, and he actually ended up going to Oak Ridge, which is kind of funny.
Interesting.
He's chasing the money at that point, just being him, and he had 2 kids,
Oh yeah,
kind of had to chase the money and the benefits. So I stepped in and basically became the programmer after working there for 2 years. Fortunately, I didn't have much problem with that because I didn't feel any animosity from anybody. I don't think the other guys that worked there that were way more experienced than I was, I don't think they really wanted to be programmers. But I could see that being a problem for any other circumstance. This young kid that's been machining 2 years is moving up to be a programmer. But it worked. And I tried to maintain humility with it because I knew I was going to goof up. I knew I worked with the guys a lot to make sure I was doing things the way that they would be happy with it. And I wasn't throwing them some crazy curveballs that I just, came from inexperience. So, now the company kept growing, and kept kind of getting, they started pushing more and more towards high volume work. They kept trying to grab, 100-piece orders here, 300-piece orders here. They were getting more into production work for like the boat industry, boat trailers and stuff like that. And I think, I don't know if it was because I couldn't make my mind up on what I wanted to do or what, but, I still wanted a machine too, but I was programming all the time. So they were trying to find a person to bring in just as a programmer and then let me fill in and then machine when I wanted to. We went through so many people. We started with a guy they hired through a temp agency. He lasted 2 weeks.
Oh no.
And he said he was a master cam programmer. But this guy, every program he made, he would run his tap before the drill.
Yeah. Once, maybe, I think we've all done something stupid, but
oh yeah,
more than once,
twice in a row.
Yeah.
3 times in a row. Yeah.
Ooh.
So, that didn't work out. We hired another guy that really didn't have a lot of machining experience. It was kind of an odd hire. I don't know, but I think they just did it because they knew him and they liked him. And he actually was great. I mean, even though he didn't know machining that much, he was a good programmer, but the money wasn't there for him. And so he left for a higher paying job after a few months. They ended up hiring an actual programmer from a production shop. Actually sent him through a training program with SolidCam to get him up to speed, and he'd been machining for 15, 20 years. And he worked out pretty well. He struggled with adapting from all high volume, I'm talking 1,000, 10,000 piece runs in copper mainly, to still, 1 off, 5 off, 10 off in any material under the sun.
Right.
But I learned a lot from that guy. He taught me a lot about probing, macros, all that kind of stuff. That was cool. They moved him up to shop manager after a while. And, throughout all this, I mean, all of our roles are kind of fluid, right? I'm machining, I'm programming, I'm, quoting, I'm, just everything just change all the time. And they moved that guy up to shop management. That didn't last real long because unfortunately it just really didn't work out too well. So they moved him around, hired another programmer to help me and machine, essentially put that on repeat for a few years. It was
that's rough.
It was. I mean, it was a little hard to deal with at times, just mentally, because unfortunately, I don't deal super well with a lot of interruptions. If I'm working on something, then I get 3 people come in the office asking me a question, oftentimes something they already know the answer to. Then it just completely blows my mind off what I'm doing, and I got to recover from it. And it sounds silly, but so it was rough sometimes. It really was. But I kept learning, kept doing. In 2019, that's June 30th, 2019 is when I started my Instagram page. And I did it that was the first time I'd ever been involved with social media at all. I didn't have a Facebook, MySpace, if anybody out there remembers MySpace. That kind of thing.
Obviously I'm old enough to remember MySpace, but yeah, I'm sure some of the listeners have no idea what we're talking about.
Right. Sound like
my friend was Tom. I understand.
Oh man. But I started it just to share my work because I thought it'd be cool. Like I was watching A-Bomb on YouTube, and John Saunders and all them, and I thought it was cool that they could share their work and teach people at the same time. And I thought, well, maybe not so much the teaching part, but I can at least show my work off. So I looked around and I figured, oh, Instagram might be the place for that. So I started my account, and it's funny. The first guy that followed me, his name was Ryan Reynolds. And I thought, there's no way. And I figured out real quick, obviously it's not the Ryan Reynolds, but
right.
It was, that sticks with me. And then, I don't know, it just started to gain a little steam because I'd post stuff every now and then, and we just did so much work. I'd post stuff basically for the shop. It was almost like it was really a Gallion manufacturing page, but I did stuff that I thought was cool. Had to be careful a few times. We didn't do a lot of sensitive work, but sometimes we did. I always tried to credit people when they worked on stuff, and I didn't. Most everything in that shop I had a hand in, though. And it just kept kind of growing and growing. And before I knew it, I had 10,000 followers, I think, in the first year.
Wow.
How long have you been on Instagram, Dylan?
I'd have to go back and look. Probably 29? No, probably 2015, 16, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you remember how different it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
As far as people seeing what you post and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Back.
Well, it used to be who you followed, and that was it, and in order. And you get to, you scroll back until you see something you remember, and you're like, all right, I'm done, until something new comes up. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not that way anymore. And really probably by 2021, things really started to change as far as that goes. And my growth did slow down some. As of right now, I'm going to take a look real quick at my follower count. Okay. As of right now, I have 62,100 followers. I want to say that sounds amazing, and it is in a way, but it is definitely a quantity over quality situation. Because I could probably go through. I mean, I don't have the time to do it. If I cleaned out all my followers that are
bots or OnlyFans stars or any of that stuff,
exactly,
I gotcha.
Junk, we'll say,
yeah.
I'd probably have like 2,000 followers.
Yeah.
But that's not just a me problem. A lot of people.
No, definitely not.
A lot of people have that issue, and it is what it is. I kind of hit a point where I kind of stopped caring about like my likes, follows, and all that stuff, and I just post what's cool. I try to post once a day, while I'm working, but it's kind of is what it is. But it did help me get to where, people look at that and they assume, man, this guy's got 60,000 followers. That's awesome. And, honestly, it helped me with this, with getting involved with Practical Machinist and everything. So does that suffice as far as my Instagram?
Yeah. The thing I was most curious about was what you kind of touched on of your attitude towards it. Because I feel like we chatted on DMs like years ago when you were around 40,000. And I think I'd asked you about, how you grow yours and stuff like that. And I could tell it was very important to you. And like you were very upset when like it, you were seeing dips or something like that. And then I got the very much impression recently or, in the last few years that like, that's not the case anymore. And so I was kind of curious of how your attitude had changed. Has it affected your mental health? Have you felt better by not stressing the follower count and the likes and the comments and all of that?
It has definitely helped. To be truthful, I don't want to say I was addicted to it, but like maybe I was. I'd pull Instagram up almost out of habit, and I still do this. I'm terrible for this. If I have a spare moment, it's almost like just reflexive. Pull my phone up, click Instagram, and I look to see how many hearts and how many little people I have up in the top right. And I still struggle with that, to be honest. I've tried to adopt an attitude where I don't care as much, but back then I certainly did. It mattered a lot to me. Truth be told, my end goal was, I guess partially it was to help my employer a bit. I was trying to semi-advertise for them, but without really advertising for them, because they did allow me to kind of do that on the clock sometimes. But it really, I always had the goal of making money off of it. That sounds kind of lame, but you see all these people that have huge accounts and they're advertising products and all this stuff, and I thought, that'd be sweet to be able to do that. And then after 3 or 4 years, I figured out people don't really do that with blue collar trades, or at least machining.
Right. Yeah.
It just don't happen. You almost have to do it. If you have the product, you can do it. But advertising someone else's product, it doesn't happen all that frequently. And if you do, you don't get a whole lot of reward.
Right. No, I think a lot of us look at people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising things on Instagram and TikTok and all of that, and kind of would love a piece of that. I don't think that that's abnormal at all, especially in a trade that is chronically underpaid like machining is.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. It's your way of trying to get a little bit extra slice of the pie, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah,
for sure.
And that aspect didn't work out, but it has led to some other good things. So I can't complain. I would say if, anybody listening that is like maybe they're new at Instagram and they're trying to grow their account, the biggest thing is be consistent and just post good quality things. It doesn't necessarily have to be the highest quality camera or anything like that, but just post cool, interesting things. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, don't get bummed out, because unfortunately, that's how they suck you in and get you hooked on social media.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you were talking about feeling addicted, and I think that many of us feel that way. Like I know one thing I saw online that I did for a while is if you ever want to really feel bad, move your icon for Instagram or any of the social media that you use often. Just move it like one page over on your phone and see how many times you tap on that empty square mindlessly, and then you go, "Oh, okay, this is this is not good."
It's eye opening. I did that, and it was I mean, it got to the point where my wife was getting upset at me for looking at it all the time, and until I turned notifications off, which definitely recommend. It drove us crazy, especially when my account was growing more, because it all the time I'd get a notification for a follower, a like, a comment, a message. It drive you bananas.
Yeah,
and nobody needs that. So, now, so somewhere around 2020 is kind of where things started to get a little bit dark in a way for Gallion manufacturing, because I mean, we all know why. 2020 was a bad year for almost everyone. And it's a shame because things were looking so good the year before. We had a great year in 2019. We had just gotten some huge orders from a farm implement company, making huge money. We'd just gotten a new machine. We'd gotten a DS30Y the previous year. And then 2020 hit. And for what hit me kind of hard was I sat down with the general manager, and he went over a budget that he had drawn up for like the next fiscal year. And, he actually tried to allocate money for, shop improvements, like new vices, new work holding, new, putting probes on some of the mills that didn't have probes, which was almost all of them. Just getting a 5th axis trunnion for one of the machines, just a lot of stuff that he saw the reasoning for, and he wanted to try to, make some room for, and actually try to run the company off of an actual budget, which they really hadn't done before. And that was exciting. And then COVID hit, and that completely went out the window. I don't know the ins and outs of this, probably not my business anyway, but they also figured out that they were not doing as well as I thought they were.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, that whole budget thing went completely out the window. And that was a huge bummer, because my whole time there, after like a year and a half or two, was trying to push forward, right? It was trying to push for better tooling, better work holding, not through experience, but just through what I saw online, and Instagram probably led to some of that. But I just see all these things that people are doing that would be a huge help. And I'm like, hey, we should try this. And for the longest time, the general manager would listen to me and try to implement it where it could. But they were very tight on the purse strings at that company. So, with COVID, orders went way down. Even at the fab division went way down. And I hate to say it, even though they had only been in metal fab for about 7-8 years by 2020, that was by far the biggest part of their company at that point.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. It was, because you say metal fab, you assume welders and brakes and stuff like that. No, they had a pallet changing Mazak laser. They had a 5x10 water jet. They had they had a huge brake press. They even got like a 10-foot by 20-foot plasma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's
some serious machinery then.
Absolutely. They even outgrew in, 2015, they moved from like a 7,000 square foot shop to, I think it ended up being maybe 12,000. And then in 2020, they moved to a 50,000 square foot place. Now, they didn't fill it up, mind you. But they have now.
Right.
Just between all the growth on that side of it, but it's very capital intensive too. And that's kind of what drags it down. So with all that, the next few years just kind of alternate between things being all right, and I really started to get burned out. Just because things would look good and then they wouldn't work out. And then they'd look all right and then they wouldn't work out. And that's hard. That's hard to deal with, especially when you take things a little bit personally. You know, I worked like the company was my company. And, you know, in a way that bit me because it certainly led to the growth that I had. You know, becoming a fully fledged CNC programmer in 3 or 4 years is pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
But then you've got, on the other hand, you've got the mental taxation of, you know, caring about this business like it's yours and you can't do anything about it.
Right. It's all of the downsides with none of the upsides.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So a few little highlights that I had was they really only bought 2 new machines during the whole time I was there. Not counting fab. They bought a ton of stuff for the fab division, but they bought 2 new machines at Machine Shop. One was the Haas DS30Y in 2018, and then they bought a DM2 with a Miteco pallet changer in 2020.
Interesting.
That thing was cool. I have to admit it was a neat machine, and unfortunately it set a lot of the time because, you know, that machine was made for high volume production and they just, for some reason, they just could not get or keep a good job to run on it. We got to where we were just running piecework on it, which was hard because, quick little tangent, you know, when you add a Miteco pallet changer to a machine, you lose like 4 or 5 inches of Z. And the DM2s have a tiny amount of Z travel to begin with. So,
oh yeah,
by the time you have a vise and a part and a tool that's 4 or 5 inches long gauge length, you're about out of room. So, anyway, 2021, they let go of one of the many programmers that they'd hired for some attitude reasons mainly. And then in mid 2021, they hired this guy. His name was Mark. He'll be a little bit more important in this story here in a little bit, but he was a great guy to work with. He had like 28 years of machining experience at that point. They hired him in as a programmer, but he did everything, man, because he had actually owned a shop previously in Ohio, and you know, he programmed, he did that fine, but man, he was a whiz at anything manual, anything on a CNC mill, or they did have I think a 5-inch spindle manual horizontal boring mill, and he blew us away with how good he was at that thing. You know, none of us had a lot of experience with HBM work, and they hired him, and like a month later, they got this big weldment that had to have a lot of machine work done on it. And this weldment was a funny shape, but it was probably about a 4-foot square by 2 feet tall. And he just threw it up there like it was nothing. Went to town. They had just taken a wild guess, and put like 40 hours of machine work on it. And I think he had it done in 2 days.
Wow!
I mean, it was his bread and butter. And
right.
Unfortunately, the owner did something that really upset him. And so he lasted about 6 months. And then he left and came to where I'm working at now. So we'll come back to that. So Mark left. That really hurt because I loved working with him. And he did so much good for the shop. But it wasn't going to work out. So the next year they hired another programmer that was pretty good. He was a good guy, a good fit for us. He's still there now. So they finally got one to stick. That was one of my bargaining chips with the company at a few times was, you know, hey, I've been your programmer for, you know, depending on the time, you know, 3 years, 5 years, 6, 7 years now. You ain't gotten anybody else to stick longer than a year. So, right. You know, give me whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you were the bottleneck and the linchpin to the whole operation, at least on the manufacturing side or the machining side.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, so throughout the next few years, my role continued to just change all the time, but I mainly became, technically the lead programmer, manual machinist when I wanted to or when I needed to, which was pretty often. And I dabbled in quoting jobs. Usually their quoters really didn't know machining, so they'd kick it over to me to give them time and material, and then they'd punch it into, E2 or whatever to actually create the quote. And not just me, but I was a part of that. I'd help the manager from time to time with different things. But I really started to struggle with getting burned out. And so 2023, I finally had enough. And I interviewed at another shop that's a good bit away. It's about 30 miles away up the interstate. And they made me a generous offer. They really did. I mean, I say that, they offered to keep the vacation time I had at Gallion's, which was not bad. I mean, honestly, for blue collar trades, it's pretty good. I could walk in the door with it and get like a $2-3 raise.
Wow.
Which really just made up for the difference in travel time.
Right.
Because I was going from like a 12-minute drive to 45 on a good day. And I accepted it. And then a week into my notice period, I found out that my dad was terminally ill. And
I'm so sorry.
I decided change ain't what I need right now. So I called the general manager and I was like, man, mind you, I'm not leaving on good terms. I essentially, I'll just be honest, I tried to rock the boat too hard is really what happened. The shop manager, I liked him. He was a good guy, but, at the time I felt like he was not doing his job and nobody wanted to listen to that. And so I laid everything out because I'm seeing all these failures in our processes and everything else. And I'm telling people this, I'm telling the general manager this, and it's just falling on deaf ears. And I'm like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I can't continue to keep caring for this company like I do, and nobody's listening to what I'm telling them. So that's really what led me to try to find somewhere else. And there's actually a few people that were going to go with me. I'm not proud of this in hindsight, but I mean, essentially we were going to gut the machine shop out of spite. And I regret that wholeheartedly. I really do.
So let me ask you a question. And this is just something I think of from time to time. Do you think that had you not been on Instagram and seen other shops performing differently and better, that you would have been so unhappy in your current job?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing either. Like, I think it's a double-edged sword of just like, I think many of us in manufacturing want that new best thing to make our job easier. We're all like, there's that quote of like, give the work to the laziest person so that they'll get it done the fastest. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the real quote is to the busiest person, but a lazy person always gets stuff done quickest and finds the easiest way to do it. Mm-hmm. And we're all, wanting to do things easier and better. Do you think seeing so many shops with 0 points and 5-axis and all that stuff, do you think you would have been as unhappy had you not seen all that stuff?
For sure. I mean,
okay.
Because exactly like you say, Dylan, you see all that out there, you see the good that it does for people, and honestly, just the cool factor of it. You see people with fully kitted out like Lang setups, and then you're over here with Kurtz that served through the Korean War. So
yes,
it does put in your mind like, man, what even is this? This is more like a blacksmith shop than a machine shop, which is not true, but that little worm.
It's how it feels. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. That little worm gets in your head and that's how you feel. On top of that, part of what pushed that particular instance was a lathe guy that we had at that time who was probably the best CNC lathe machinist. I don't even want to call him an operator that I've met. He's very talented, very smart. possibly could have been a really good shop manager. And that's kind of what we were trying to do, even though, he hadn't worked there that long, but he had a lot of talent for directing people. He had charisma to lead people. And that's kind of what we were pushing for was, hey, can we look at having this guy run the shop and this other guy, don't fire him. We don't want that, but can we do something else with it? I really think part of the reason that it became so widespread in the shop, because it wasn't just me, it was probably half to 2/3 of the shop was really just in a bad way at that time. I feel like in hindsight, that one particular guy had a lot to do with that, because there was a lot of going around just talking, spreading frustration and stuff like that. And I get it, because I wasn't any better. I'll fully admit I was part of the problem too. Really what did I, can't say I'd change what I do. I regret what I did. But if anybody else is like in that situation where you're frustrated with your job, don't spread it. Don't make everybody else miserable. If it bothers you that bad, find a new job.
Right.
If you can't work it out with your employer or your boss or whoever, I mean, either let it go or find somewhere else.
Yeah. It's hard to not commiserate though. Like I've been there as well, where, there's that one person that is affecting everyone's lives, and it's just frustrating. You just need somebody to vent to, and like, who else can you vent to besides your coworkers? Absolutely.
And it probably happens in almost every workplace in the world. I think there comes a time and place where people have to know, okay, because you never know who's going to rat you out either. We didn't really have that problem, but what bit me, so I'd called the general manager a week into my notice when I found out that my dad was sick and not fixable. And I was like, man, I'm really sorry about all this. Is there any way that we can cancel my resignation and let me keep my job? And he had to make a few phone calls and he had to do a little bit of smoothing over, but they let it happen. And then the shop manager, like the next week, took me in his office and he tore me apart because he knew what happened.
Oh boy.
They told him about it, I think, maybe even the day that I found out about my dad. And then it was like, the next Monday or Tuesday, I think that I decided to try to rescind my resignation. That was tough, but you know what? I just took it, because by that point I was like, yeah, this shouldn't have gone the way that it did. And I just looked at him and was like, dude, I'm sorry. And I hope that, and he said, we'll figure out a way to rebuild from this. And we did. I got to give him that. He, after that, it took a little bit, but it basically got back to normal. And so I got to give him credit for that. So that was like July 23rd, 2023. 13th. And at that point, I tried to adopt a mentality more of like, okay, it's not your shop. Let it go. Do your job. Do it well. Leave it at the door. I tried. But myself and that same lathe guy that I just mentioned, we had a little bit of a phrase, and this is going to sound weird out of context. We like to tease each other and say, if it's in you, it's in you. And what that means is, if you have it in you to care about a place, you can't get it out.
Right.
You're either going to care about it or you're going to drive yourself crazy trying not to care about it. Fast forward to 2024, and that's where I was. I went in and I tried to have fun every day. And I did. I mean, I enjoyed my coworkers. I tried to really like knuckle down into manual machining when I could, and just let the BS go and just enjoy myself. But the thing I noticed is I started to have almost like an apathetic take on everything. It would bleed into my personal life. It would bleed into my professional life, where I just, it's almost like the don't care went too far.
Right.
Right. And I mean, by this point, I had started a group chat on Instagram like in late 2023, and that's ultimately what led to the podcast that I do. And some of them guys can attest. I was struggling, in like 2024, quite a bit, and a lot of them guys actually were pushing me to either, basically come down to either shut up or find a new job, because I'm tired of listening to you complain.
Right. I'm sick of hearing it either way. So get it done.
And I was dancing around trying, I had my excuses and this and that. One of the biggest things for me is I just don't want to have a long drive, and I mean, it's hard to do when you live out in the sticks like I do. Because essentially all the good, in quotes, shops, that are kitted out with cool tooling and equipment and stuff, they're, 45 minutes to an hour away at best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not what I'm after. Well, enter Mark, who I mentioned before. He's working at this place called RBSA Industrial. And originally they were in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is like an hour and a half from his house. But it was like 45, 50 minutes from where I live, maybe an hour. Not interested at all.
Right.
Well, lo and behold, I think in like early 2024, maybe late 2023, I can't remember, they bought a place right here in Sweetwater. Right. I mean, 3 minutes from where my then current job is. And so I actually came down here and visited quite a bit, because he's a real good friend of mine. We, even after he left Gallion, we'd go get dinner together sometimes. Our wives, met and became friends and whatnot. It was really, despite the age gap, I mean, he's 20, 21 years older than I am. So naturally, when I started getting frustrated with my job at Gallion Manufacturing, I decided, well, I wonder what it's like there working with Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So I came down here several times, just kind of looking, visiting him, looking around, whatever, because it's just cool. You know how it is, Dylan. You go to another shop, it's just immediately cool to see what other people do, how they do it, what they have, all that stuff.
Totally.
And after a while, they got to where they felt like they did want to bring on a second machinist. He was the only one. It's a small company. I'll get to that in a minute. And here again, I came down here, talked to the owner a little bit, talked to Mark, looked at what the job was about, and I said, man, I don't think it's for me.
Really?
Yep. I don't know what's wrong with me, man. I just, even though, I've been married for, almost 8 years now, but somehow I still have commitment issues. But after a little bit longer at Gallions, I was like, okay, no, I can't do this anymore. Let's try this. I came down here, talked to the owner, and we worked some stuff out. And I started in March this year. Leaving Gallions was really, really hard. And I tell you what's funny. When I almost left the last time, it was going to be hard, but it didn't feel hard at the time, because I had hate in my heart. I put in, I think, 6 weeks notice unofficially, and then 4 weeks officially. And that was really hard, especially the last couple of days. I mean, it was tough to let go of a place you've been at for 10 and a half years, despite the fact that it's, you're frustrated and you're aggravated about a few things. It's the people that make it so hard,
Oh, totally. I mean, it's a solid third of your life, it's going to be tough no matter what it is.
Exactly. I mean, there's people that the handful of people that have been there longer than I was, yeah, I've known them for, like you said, Dylan, third of my life. So that's hard to let go of. But I had to. The nice thing is, since we're both shops are in Sweetwater, I actually Mark and I both go meet with three of them for lunch on Thursdays.
Oh, awesome.
So we don't really have to it's not completely, okay, I'm probably not going to see you again. It's
right.
Hey, see you next
You're not
time.
losing your work family.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I've been there a few times since I left. I've only been gone for, 4.5 months, I think. Yeah. But I've been in there a few times, either, to have them do something for me or, borrow a couple tools, unfortunately.
Wait, you mentioned, I think, on one of your recent episodes that you guys had them heat treat stuff for you.
Yep. Every now and then.
Something like that.
We've had them do, not since I've been here, but when I worked there, we did some heat treating because we do some heat treating in-house here at RBSA, but our furnace is pretty small. Gallion's has a furnace that's I think it's 24 by 20 by 36.
Oh, wow. So, that's a pretty big one.
Oh, yeah. And
yeah.
And so there's quite a few dye jobs that they've done here that, we had them heat treat. And we might have to start looking at that in the future too. We'll see. So yeah, that takes us up to, in March, actually, before I get to me starting here at RBSA, I really got to give it to the people of Gallions because, especially given it had only been like a year and a half since I almost left before. I thought they were going to take it a lot worse than they did. Everybody was very good about it. I don't think anyone had made it hard or awkward. The general manager, it was a weird arrangement, but he and I were and are really good friends. We still are. And I think we've probably become better friends now that the work stuff isn't in the way. But it's so funny because I texted him that day and I said, "Hey man, do you think we can get together and talk sometime this evening?" And he said, "Sure, we can do that. How about I just meet you at your place?" So I said, "That's fine." Yeah. So I went home and he showed up and I get in his car and he says, "All right, tell me this. Are you about to give me turn in your notice?" Because I had a dream last night that you turned in your notice.
No way.
I'm not kidding, man. And I was like, "Yeah, Nick, I'm sorry, but yeah, that's what this is." He has a history of being prophetic like that. It's really weird. I'm not into supernatural type stuff or anything, but he had a knack for stuff like that. It was really funny. And we sat in his car for 2 hours just talking. We got the business out of the way at the beginning and then we just chatted. And then towards the end, we got back more to business and, whatever. So, originally I was trying to shoot for a 4-week notice in general, but it ended up being 6, just out of, it just worked out and it was fine. That probably helped. And it helped that they had a programmer that they could move everything to. It also helped that they didn't have a lot of work. So really a lot of days I was going in there not really doing anything. So it's not like there was a lot of workload that was eventually there was, but there wasn't a lot of workload that was going to get immediately shoved off on someone else's plate. So it was complete opposite of essentially how I was done when I took the position. So yeah, 2025 March, I started here at RBSA, and it's been very interesting, man. To have a new job in a new shop with new equipment, doing new work. It's pretty cool.
I bet. Yeah. Learning new software, you got the bamboo behind you. It's been cool watching all the things you've gotten to play with since your new job. So you mentioned your group chat and then also the, creation of your podcast. I'd love to kind of get into how all that happened as well.
Sure. So I just got a wild hair idea, like late 2023, I think. I forget when. Instagram's great for connecting with people, but you do it basically one-on-one, right? Like I can talk to you, we can talk together, share knowledge, whatever, but it's just us. And I got to thinking, perhaps there's another way that I can make this better to where we can get like a collective thing, like a hive mind type of thing. And so I put out an invitation for like shop owners and programmers and good machinists on Instagram to, would you be interested in joining a group chat for whatever, machining, business, whatever. And, I started adding a few people here and there, and it got to where it had quite a few people. It's up to, like 80 people now, although I'm going to say about 20 are actually, active. And it was great. It was super cool to be able to have, you've got all these, people that own shops, run shops, program for shops, all these different backgrounds to where you can pop in there and ask a question and immediately get an answer of, this is what I would do without having to go through like, how like the Facebook machinist groups are. They're full of people that just fuss and complain and, tell you the way you'd have done it back in 1857.
Right.
And if you can't do it that way, you're not even a machinist. Well, I ain't got time for that. So, a few of us kind of started joking about starting a podcast because right now that's the cool thing to do. It seems like every time you turn around, somebody's starting a podcast.
Right.
And we joked about it. Well, we work for Practical Machinist, and we joked and came up with Impractical Machinist as our group chat name, as kind of a play off. We weren't associated with Practical Machinist at the time. Well, we invited Ian Sandusky, who is their main content creator.
Right.
He's done their Shop Talk series for years. He's done most of their shop tours, and especially at that time, they hardly had anyone else working with them. And we invited him to the group, and he loved it. Offered his funny Canadian spin on everything, and we were like, "Well, I wonder what it'd be like if we got Practical Machinist involved with this," because you know how it is, because you started with Intolerance years ago, and you've earned your viewership just through sheer hard work and good quality.
Thanks.
And
appreciate it.
Oh, of course, Dylan. I mean, really, like you and Machinist Therapy Hotline inspired us to do what we're doing. So we got to thinking, Practical Machinist has a little bit of a following already, and sure, I do too on Instagram. But that doesn't really translate to, Spotify or Apple or whatever necessarily. So
right.
We brought it up to Ian, and he was like, "You ain't gonna believe this. I wish I could do a Canadian accent." But he said, "Not gonna believe this, but Practical Machinist has been wanting to start a podcast." So, we got to talking to the people that actually manage their media production, and they made us an offer, and I turned them down. No, I'm just kidding. I finally learned, okay, maybe I should just take what's given to me.
Right.
I had to do that. So, there was some difficulties at first, right? Like, going from doing stuff on your own where I don't want to say too much, but like there's some stuff you got to be careful of when you go from working just you're your own person, your own media person, if you will, to working for a company that's got some guidelines and things that they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took some adjustment, but I'm I'm tickled that everything's worked out like it has. They've been great to work with.
Yeah, you've been doing it a year. You guys just released your year episode.
Right.
Congrats.
Thank you, man. How long have you been doing with Intolerance?
5 or 6 years, something like that.
Awesome.
I think you're episode 262. So It would be 5 years if I had stuck to every week. But, I've missed a month when my daughter was born and weeks here and there when things get busy. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been about 6 years.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Because there's just not that much out there, for especially machining, especially, Machinist Therapy Hotline's not really doing anything now.
I know.
Which is a bummer. Come on, Jody.
Such a bummer.
What the heck, man? But anyway, and it was hard to get started because, I'll tell you a kind of a secret. Originally, it was going to be 4 people. It was going to be myself, Cameron, Bradley, and Kenny Urban, Patriot Machinist.
Oh, okay.
But he's got some stuff he's working with Imugi and one of the AI cam companies, and it just didn't jive. So, we had to, and he was totally fine with that. He stepped back, and the 3 of us signed on to do it. And it took us 3 recordings to actually get something that was worth publishing. And mostly it was my fault. Cam and Brad would tell you otherwise, but mostly I feel like it was my fault because I wanted it to be more like a presentation, right? Mm-hmm. Like scripted, at least like a lengthy introduction. And the first episode, I went through and I almost wrote a script for the whole thing because I wanted it to be like, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we've done. And that's episode 1. And we made that and we shot it over to the folks at Practical Machinist, and they're like, this really ain't what we're looking for.
Wow.
Right. Can we try again? And we tried it again. And I think we kind of went for similar but different and didn't work. They didn't care for it. They gave us a little bit clearer guidelines at that point of like what they really wanted, which helped. Because it's funny, like this is the first time I've been on someone else's podcast, right? I never really listened to podcasts that much. I mean, I've listened to yours a bit, MTH a bit, but just wasn't really ever a thing that I was into. I think the same thing for the other 2, but we just wanted to do it just to kind of offer our take on things. Finally, the 3rd one, it worked out, and that became our first episode. So we actually spent probably 2 months trying to record stuff before something finally stuck. That's why I think our contract started in March, and our episode didn't come out until July.
So let me ask you this. Looking back on it, when you sent those first 2 off, were you actually happy with them? Like, did you think if it went out, would you have been happy with them going out, or did you just send it going, this is the best I've got right now?
At the time, I thought it was pretty good.
Okay.
Mainly out of ignorance. In hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that was garbage. We should have done it because we learned from it. Now
we got to push PM to release the uncut first episode just to see it.
Oh man, that'd be awful, but it would be funny. It would be funny.
At least some clips. Come on, PM. Right. I want to see this.
Yeah, we definitely learned from it. And the thing is, man, in the year that we've done it, we've learned a lot, and I feel like we've continued to step our game up. I mean, we've got better mics, better cameras, better just understanding of conversating over a platform like this, handling guests better. And again, I have to give Ian Sandusky, Lakewood Machines, some credit because he was our first guest. It's the easiest thing to do. He's already the Practical Machinist guy, basically. Why not have him as our first guest? It's just like an icebreaker, right? Because I think we went 4 episodes and it was just us 3. And then finally was like, okay, let's try having a guest. And it felt like we were on his podcast because he's so thinking good at, he's just used to presenting and being sort of a media person. He came in hot and heavy with questions and all this stuff. So, and that like kind of, shook us up a little bit. We were like, okay, we need to work on this and really step our game up a bit. And we did.
But it's a practice skill. Like I think it comes across very often, even when I'm listening to other people's podcasts, as like, this is just a conversation. Anybody could do this. And it's not until you're doing it that you realize knowing when to speak, knowing when not to speak, so you're not stepping on each other's toes, knowing to be thinking a little bit ahead of like what questions things might bring up. Like it's a skill. It's just something that, you need reps on. I think it's very rare for somebody to come in to podcasting or YouTube video creating or anything like that and be at the top, right off the bat.
Absolutely, man. I can say, hosting the podcast has actually helped my confidence and honestly, this is going to make me sound like I'm inbred, but if I don't already, but like, I think it's helped me actually with just speaking in general, because I can get my point across a little better now. Just things like that. So yeah, it did help a lot. And if anybody, I feel like anybody that has the idea of starting a podcast, do it and it will get better. Your first, here's how it's been for me. And I'm curious what, how you feel. I felt like our first few episodes were awesome until we got to our 5th episode. And it's like, man, that was garbage. And then our 6th episode came out where we started to really work on things. I was like, oh man, this is it. This is great. And then we got to episode 10 and I was like, man, everything we did before this was crap. And that's just continued until probably about episode 20. And now it's sort of settled a little bit, but it's like a continuous, it's like machining in a way. The first stuff you make when you first learn on a machine, whether you're at a shop or you're in tech school or whatever, it's junk in hindsight, but it was probably the best you could do at the time. And that's all that mattered.
Oh, totally. I think if you're a programmer and don't go back to old programs and cringe seeing how you used to program stuff, you're either a liar or you haven't been programming very long.
Absolutely. I've had stuff I've done that with in my time here, and I've worked here 4.5 months.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's so rare that I get repeat work in my shop, but on the, 1 or 2 jobs a year that do come back, I go back and I'm like, well, I do that differently and I do this differently. And I found a different technique for that. And it's, even if it's not that difficult of a part, there's still something I've learned since the last time I did it. So
absolutely.
And yeah, podcasting is definitely the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely been interesting for sure. And there's going to be, there's going to be more and more things coming of it. I'm hoping, here in a couple months or so, I can actually start recording from home. I mean, I'm at my workplace right now recording, because, I don't know if you may not know, I'm in the middle of a house build. So, and I've been living in a camper for 2.5 years, and I'm not going to record a podcast from inside a camper with, a noisy air conditioner and, clutter and everything else. But hopefully, soon I'll be able to just record from home and not have to come to work to do it. That's been one of the harder things. It's just, I mean, you and I have been trying to record this for like, 3 months? It was before your daughter was born.
Right.
And obviously that was number one priority,
Right. No, but scheduling is tough.
Oh yeah.
It just is tough.
And then you get, on our end, we've got 3 people that have to come together and be able to get together at the same time, 4 or 5 if we have guests. And then Brad doesn't want to get out of bed until 10 o'clock in the morning. So, that we aggravate him about that all the time.
I can't blame him. That's half the fun of working for yourself.
Right. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I don't want to derail your your podcast, Dylan, but I'm curious what the hardest like guest or time constraint you've ever had to work around is, like a time zone difference, that kind of thing.
Time zone difference, I would say anybody that I've had in Australia is pretty tough.
Yeah.
Like they're literally in another day. So like when I have Josh Hacko on, he's been on a couple times, it's like 6 a.m. for him and almost, pretty late at night for me, and or midday for whatever it is. It's a significant time difference. And up until maybe the last year or so, I've always fought a little bit of a time delay recording with people that are like, the further away they are, obviously the longer stuff has to travel.
Okay.
And I've had a few episodes where the time delay is just enough where we are constantly stepping on each other's toes and almost not having a conversation.
I see what you mean. I bet that's a pain. Yeah. We haven't had anybody from Australia or New Zealand or anything. That really the biggest we had a woman from Germany one time, but that wasn't as bad because they're ahead. It was like 5 p.m. where she was, and I forget, it was like 1 or 2 here. See, with us, like Cameron and I are both in Eastern time. Brad's in Central, so it's not that hard. And I'm sure that's why
it's pretty close,
right?
Yeah,
I'm sure that's why Machinist Therapy Hotline had such a hard time, because Jody was in New Zealand, and then you got guys on the East Coast. You got Tony in California. I mean, I don't envy them.
You're coordinating the entire world at that point. That's a tough one for sure. Well, from the Patreon, Tux Garage asked, Pat, how's your new job treating you? So moved over. You enjoying it so far? You said you've been learning all this new stuff. How's the day-to-day feeling?
It has been definitely a major improvement for sure. No job's perfect. And obviously, I'm not going to get into some of the little things I don't like. Some of it's nitpicky, so it ain't even worth mentioning. Probably the biggest bummer for me is the lack of air conditioning. You and I have talked about that. And I, talking to somebody in Arizona, I almost have no right to really complain.
I have AC, so I can't complain.
Well, you'd have to, man. Your machines probably wouldn't even work if you didn't have air conditioning.
Well, our past shop did not have AC, and we put in a mini split about a year before we left that shop, a year and a half, and we put it in because it was we get monsoons here, so like very quick on and off heavy rainstorms. And there was one day where we had a monsoon and it was like 98 in the shop and 80 something percent humidity, and we're just like dripping sweat. We're like, we need to do something. Like, we can't move today, so what can we do to make this somewhat more bearable? And like the mini split was great, but it was only a 10-degree difference no matter what. So when it was 110 outside, it was 100 in the shop. And it was like, well, it feels better and it's less humid, but it's still not great. Mm-hmm. It was rough for sure.
Absolutely. That's the thing with Tennessee. We don't get near as hot, but we do hit the high 90s sometimes, and it'll be 70, 80% humidity, especially in the morning. I'll tell you, when I open up the shop in the morning, I'm usually the first one here. It'll be like 70 outside. It feels like it's 85 inside. I mean, from the minute we start, it's warm. And then usually we open up the back door. We got a big garage door in the back. So start blowing some fans around. It helps. I'd like to talk the owner into putting an exhaust fan in. That way it can, blow a little bit overnight and pull some hot air out. That'd help. At first, it wasn't a big deal. When I started in March, it was fine. It was cold in the mornings, but the shop does have heat. It just doesn't have air conditioning. Mm-hmm. It has air conditioning. It just needs repaired.
Oh no!
Right. But that's really the biggest thing. I mean, it's been super cool to learn. I went from using SolidCam for 8 years and SolidWorks, and now I'm learning Fusion, which has been really cool. I'm learning 5-axis, which is something I've always wanted to do. I remember pushing Gallions to get into 5-axis stuff, back in like 2018, just because I could see how helpful it would be. And those thoughts have all been validated since I've been here. Learning that's been cool. And, I worked in an all HOS shop, so now I'm having to learn Fanuc. We've got two machines that have a Fanuc control. And it wasn't that hard to learn as far as at least being able to run it, get any depth with it. Not so much, but as far as just being able to set things up and run it, sure, I can do that. And just the bender work in general is just interesting. Going from, mainly job shop stuff where it's all someone else's design or the customer's design and the print is law to Coke's still getting me. And going to stuff that primarily we design in-house, even if it is to customer specs, like the tooling we make, they usually tell us, the size of the die, the radius, the tube size they're bending. We might have to actually go to their facility and get like the mounting dimensions, keys, and, bolt patterns and stuff like that. But, we design it. We know how it works. And if we need to either, not that I don't think I've had to do this, but I'm sure it'll happen, especially now that I said that. If we ever have to fudge on something, we know what we can and we can't fudge on, which is always helpful.
Well, I'm sure it's gratifying too to see the end product.
Oh, yeah.
Like on the rare occasion that I get a customer that sends me pictures of the assembled parts, it's always the coolest thing for me. Like even if it's something I'm not interested in, just being like, oh, there's my part amongst 100 other parts. That's so cool.
Absolutely, man. And, it's funny you say that. Probably the job that I was the most proud of and still am from when I worked at Gallions was a job just like that, where we kind of reverse engineered an existing assembly, modified it to be more like machinable for us. And then we made all the components, and when we put them together, they worked. And it was just so stinking cool because we never had that hardly ever. It was one part that went in someone's machine that we had no idea what it did. Whereas now, we might not necessarily get to see the machine that it goes on, but we get to see all the tooling together and how it works. And when we do the machine refurbishes, we do get to see the end result there, and that's been really cool too. I've never really been much of a mechanical person, which sounds funny. I'm a machinist. Why am I not a mechanical person? But I'm just special like that, I guess. So, and that's actually one thing coming here to RBSA, I have learned more mechanical stuff. I've learned a little bit about hydraulics and electronics and, just mechanical things like that I really didn't have anything else to do. And that actually led to the point where I changed my own oil for the first time this year.
Hey,
there you go. Instead of paying some knucklehead $50 to do it, It's a start.
That's awesome. Let's see, both Tuck's Garage and your co-host, Cameron. So Tuck says, can I get your best Yahoo impression? And Cameron says, was Pat born a Yahoo or was that a learned behavior? So let's lay it out. What is a Yahoo? And then, give us your best impression. And, was that from birth?
All right. So a Yahoo, that stems from the first episode of the Impractical Machinist podcast. And that was my term to refer to all these walk-in guys. I don't know if you deal with a lot of walk-in customers. I hope you don't.
We don't allow it. We have big old signs that say by appointment only.
Smart man. That's one thing I do not miss is, and I've said that 1,000 times, they don't do walk-in stuff here. You wouldn't even know there's anything down. We're down in a hole almost off the highway, so you almost don't even know this place is here. Gallions was different because the owner, I swear he knew every farmer within a 10-mile radius. And there's a ton of farms around there, and all them guys are old, and they work off the buddy system. They you do me a favor, I'll do you a favor down the road, which usually you do them a favor, and that's about all you get. They come back
Right.
next year, want another favor.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the walk-in work was definitely something most of the time I didn't care for working at Gallions, because it's all the time doing something for a farmer or an inventor that had the next cool idea, but he wanted everything made cheap, that kind of junk. To me, a Yahoo is the definition is definitely broadened. It was just like a customer of a machine shop that had no idea about anything about machining, but he wanted things to be cheap and easy, but he wanted it done right. And he'd bring you some junk to work on it. No lie, I've worked on parts that still had horse manure on them.
Oh,
Not fun.
gross.
So originally that was a Yahoo. Now it's kind of become more like people like that, certainly, but people that are just kind of, they do things the hack, the redneck way. I mean, you've probably seen my Be a Yahoo series on Instagram that I started. It's essentially people doing things in machining that, some of them work fine. They're just not ideal, but people make fun of you for it. I've been made fun of it, like using a center drill to engrave instead of an actual engraving tool. I think I've used an actual engraving tool one time to etch a part, and I didn't even like it. So, I forget what all ones I've done so far. I've got like 30 written down. But yeah, it's just kind of a term for, either redneck customers or people that, just do go about things the redneck backwards way. So was I born that way? I kind of did grow up. I mean, my dad was very frugal, and so he did a lot of times do things the cheap way. He would never ask anybody else to do anything for cheap for him, but he would do things cheap for himself. And I don't know. I guess and especially at Gallions, which little did I know, but I felt like I didn't have much to work with there as far as like tooling and stuff like that. Always having to come up with, stuff. Modern CNC machinists make fun of you for, grinding a high-speed tool bit to, make a part with, or, regrinding your drills like you and Zap were talking about, or, just doing things the least optimal way, and I guess that's what I'm used to, because I've only ever worked for shops that did not have the best tooling. They did not have, all the cool stuff out there. And I mean, that's just kind of what my background is, just trying your best to figure it out with what you got.
Oh yeah, totally. And to be clear, and I think I did a poor job of that in Zap in my conversation. Like, I understand doing that stuff. I just think that in modern day, a lot of the times that ends up, you're tripping over dollars to pick up pennies kind of thing.
And I agree completely. I end up working for shops that don't see it that way. But no, you're right. You and Zap were not making fun of it at all. It's just, it is just simple sense that, like, up to a certain point, you just throw the stupid drill away and get a new one. If that's a $2 number 7 drill, you're going to spend more than $2 in shop rate standing there regrinding it,
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, now you get into bigger stuff. That's different. But, I'm also terrible at regrinding drills, for all my old school machining stuff that I've done in my career. That's one thing I am not good at. So,
I mean, that's something you have to do all the time, I think, to be good at.
Oh, yeah.
It's not an easy thing. I remember doing it in school, like between that and grinding our own lathe bits, it was probably a solid week and a half or 2 weeks of instruction. Because, like, my instructor was like, you were going to get it perfect or you were going to not move on. So I probably resharpened. And, I mean, he would like look at it, be like, nope, start again, and just like stick it into the grinder and flat the end of it and be like, all right, try again. It was like, oh, cool. All right.
Wow.
All right. So like I ground that thing a lot. I eventually got there, but it was tough.
That's kind of, my friend Mark that I work with now, like I say, now he's got 32 years under his belt. And he told me when he did his apprenticeship, I mean, that's kind of how he started was, you get a bucket of drills to regrind. And you'd know real quick if you didn't grind one well, because the guy that needed it would bring it back to you and be like, man, this thing don't grind worth words, and you'd have to do it again. So he's great at it. So, if ever I need something reground, I'm like, hey, Mark, you help me out here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And like hand grinding tools and stuff has really got me out of a bind before. My first job, we had a manual machinist there, Brad, who I could bring anything to, and he would make it work and figure out how to get me a tool that could make that feature. So it has its place, but yeah, it's just tough when that's like your only option. The story I always tell is I worked at a place once and we had to make like 60 or 100 of these 4140 or 4340 artillery bodies, smart artillery shells for government contractor, and they were hardened to like high 50s, if not low 60s, and they wanted me to program them all. It was the last job I worked at that shop, and I think I bought maybe like $200 worth of AccuPro end mills because we had nothing but regrinds in the drawers, and they got horribly angry at me the next day for spending that much. And I'm like, what do you expect for this job? You're making there's no way you're not making tens of thousands of dollars on this job in addition to my labor. Like, what? I can't spend a couple $100 to make sure that I can make these parts. And they were super tight tolerance. Like, we turned blanks on the lathe and then brought them over the mill, and it's just like, all right, I think I'm done here. Like, I think this is the end of my time here.
Trust me, I understand that. That's, one of the difficulties here, it probably is the tooling side of things, because the owner is a little tight. It is a small company, right? We're like 5 employees, including the owner and his wife. Right. So I get it. And also, let me think about how to word this. There's quite a few customers that owe us a lot of money. So, and when you're a small shop, you know how it is, Dylan. You can't deal with that all that well for long. So, it's almost a perfect storm in a way, because I hired on, and not that I was expensive, but I certainly wasn't cheap. And so you've increased your payroll, and then, I kind of got them out of the little bit of a hole that they were in from just having one machinist. And then they're not getting any more work because, just the world economy is just a mess right now. And then you've got customers that aren't paying. And it's like, yeah, no wonder we're having to work with, end mills that are a little bit beaten up and stuff like that. And it's not, not everything is like that, but it's frustrating at times for sure. Because I was kind of told that, like, this place is good for taking your recommendations and following through with them. And I believe that. I understand now that the timing is just not great, and I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it's a rough time for everybody right now.
Exactly.
Even if you're busy, like, it's just everything seems to be fighting you no matter what you're trying to do. So I understand for sure. We got a few questions about the Tennessee floor finish. Kyle says floor finishing strategies. JFM LLC says Tennessee floor finish, of course. And AM Metal says, can he help convert you to a Tennessee floor finish? So talk to me about the TFF.
Oh, man. TFF, that started as a meme. And if I'm not mistaken, I think John Fettig, JFM, actually named it that kind of after me. I don't really do that. I don't, I guess because it looks kind of janky and redneck. That's why it got named after the guy from Tennessee. But yes, it started a long time ago, and it became a meme of, essentially, to give Tennessee floor finish a definition, although it's a fully dead meme, is essentially when you leave the floor finish from like an adaptive or dynamic roughing operation. So you don't come back in to clean it up, or, maybe you leave some stock, but then you come back with the same tool path for a finish pass. And so you end up with a lot of, just a funny pattern instead of your, I guess you'd say conventional, like a pocket or profile type of tool path where you can tell it's wide, shallow cuts with an end mill for your floor finish. And I wish I could remember exactly how that started. I think I had a picture of a part that I didn't mean to leave that on there, but I forgot to have like a Z offset or Z stock. So it ended up with that, and I just kind of went with it because it didn't really matter. And then people started making fun of me. But then I found out some people actually do that for real. And yeah, that's just been a funny thing to talk about. I don't really do that. I've tried. I've actually tried using Fusion's adaptive for some stuff like that. And I just, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes I end up with little tiny nibs in the corners where it, changes direction or whatever. And I've just kind of quit doing that. I go with a facing or pocket toolpath most times. Are you a fan of the idea of Tennessee floor finish?
But definitely not. I have done it. Like, that's not to say that I haven't done it. There are times that I think the times that I've used it, the only times I've used it is similar to like when you're doing one pass from stock to finish on a lathe to keep rigidity. I've had very thin parts where I have to take a top hat off. And so I just take it in a very small step over, straight to finish, adaptive type of toolpath, just to keep the rigidity through the entire cut. But past very unique situations like that, you'll never catch me shipping adaptive looking stuff.
Nice. I can't blame you. Like I say, people joke about it. I don't like it. Can look cool in some instances,
Oh yeah,
and especially if you do it as a finish pass, it's not as bad. But if you just rough with it and then leave that, it's usually kind of rough.
Yeah. Ryan asks, what's your favorite tool still to cut and least favorite?
So, at this job, probably 90% of what I machine is S7. Almost all of our dies are made from S7. And I don't mind it. I really don't. I mean, I would say A2 or S7 are definitely my favorites because I think in my experience, they machine pretty similarly. I can't decide between M2 or D2 for my least favorite. Probably M2 just because of how tough it is. But man, D2, I've had to surface grind D2 before. In some cases, and that can be tough if you don't have the right wheel, which I never did.
Right.
Oh man, that's tough.
I mean, D2's got some giant carbide grains in it.
Oh yeah, it's got some tough scale on it after you heat treat it, and there's been a lot of times, probably small side tangent. Probably one of the things that really helped the owner of my last job, Mr. Gallion, really start to respect me was we had gotten a big job for a company one time, and there was a lot of parts that had to be heat treated and ground, and most of them were D2. And they asked me if I could come help them with that because I'd done a little bit of surface grinding, not much, and they had they had quite a bit of grinding capability. I mean, that shop had 2 cylindrical grinders, 3 surface grinders, and 2 jig grinders.
Oh wow!
So, and yeah, a lot of those parts were D2, and I remember having to basically get the scale off, take a thousandth or two to clean it up, and then redress the wheel, and then touch off again, and then start going at it. So yeah, I almost feel like M2 when it's heat treated isn't as bad to grind because I don't know, it doesn't have as much tough scale. I don't know, so I'm gonna say D2, probably my least favorite.
Okay, totally fair. All right, Pat, I'll go for it.
I was just thinking, I don't think I did a Yahoo impersonation or impression.
Oh yeah.
So
give me the impression.
All right. Picture this. You just did a repair job for a farmer. He has a shifter handle for his stupid John Deere tractor that he needed a new decent. and he wants it today. So you take it back there and you measure out the old one. And of course, make it just like this, but different, you know. So you figure it out and you put the hole in there. You measure it with precision. You measure it with calipers and gauge pins and mics and stuff like that. Get the job done in 15 minutes. He comes back after lunch and he's like, "Hey, Sean, where's the shifter knob at?" And so you hand it to him and he's like, "Son, that hole don't look like it's in the same place there. You sure it's right side? That looks bigger than that other." And you tell him, "Well, sir, I measured it with precision gauge pins. I'm fairly certain it's the exact right size, certainly within plus or minus farmer tolerances." And he says, "Well, hey, you know what? I think you're right. I think it is the same thing. So I thank you, son." And you turn to the manager. "So how much I owe you for this?" And Tiny, the shop manager's nickname was Tiny. He was like 6'5". And Tiny, the manager, he's like, "You don't owe us anything. It's considered a freebie. We did that all the time." "Oh man, no. I can't be giving you nothing, taking nothing free now. I tell you what, son." You waddle over to me sitting at my desk, reach in your pocket. "I tell you what," pull out a $1 bill. You take this. All right. This is thank you for doing all your hard work on this, and don't spend it all in one place now. I wanted to strangle that man. That's a real story. That happened, and that's what turned me against all these people. So there's your Yahoo impression.
I do not blame you at all. I've never worked with a person like that in a shop, but it reminds me a lot of when I've worked in the food industry and people would be, they'd tip you 65 cents and be like, "Don't spend it all in one place." And you're like, "I hate you and I hope you never come back."
That person in particular, and I see him all the time. He's all the time at all these little country restaurants around here. I guarantee you, he's the type of guy to sit there and eat, $100 worth of food and leave like a $2 tip. I think he's doing him a favor. Anyway.
I think if anybody was at all questioning what a Yahoo is at this point, we all have a great picture of who that person is now.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right, Pat. Well, that brings me to the last questions I ask every guest every week. What's one cam metrology or business tip or trick that helped you this week?
Let me consult my notes.
Okay.
I did try to prepare a little bit for this deal, and I promise.
You did not have to. We're all good.
Oh, I know. You told me. And matter of fact, Zap told me prepare as little as possible.
Yeah.
So, this week, can't really say something for this week because we have not had a lot of work. Tuesday was the first time I've worked on a paying job in probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's not good.
That's rough.
Kudos to the owner of RBSA for not laying me off. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I will say probably the hugest thing for me just in general since coming here is being able to make full use of probing. Fusion, we have the manufacturing extension. And so you got probing right there in Fusion. It is wonderful. I did not have that at my last job. The probing module for solid cam, when we looked at it, was $2,500, which would have been fine, honestly.
Right.
Would have been well worth it. But then by the time that they actually got serious about it, it was like $6,000.
Ooh.
Plus, we only had by the time they bought their last machine, like half the mills had Renishaw probes on them, so a little bit limited. Being able to come here and have probes on 2 of the machines. By the way, another tangent. Sorry. Possum Solutions. He's been on here, right?
Yeah,
great guy.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Jarrett.
He actually came here and met Mark and I and helped us set up the probe on our feeler vertical mill. It came with.
Oh, awesome.
Oh yeah, that dude is so smart.
Yes, he is.
He came here and helped us get it running because it came with it. It came with it from the factory when whoever bought it before we bought it. But it was not working when RBSA acquired the machine. So it's just been an edge finder and indicator and shims and stuff like that until then. Now, we don't have the probing programs, so we have to do everything from Fusion. And it's just so awesome to be able to, measure with it, pick stuff up with it, and control all that directly from CAM instead of, I've done plenty of that at my last job, but, I had to do it all by hand. And not that that's too terribly difficult, but if you don't do it for like a year, because what ends up happening is it's not worth doing 99% of the time. It's not worth the time investment. But then when you do get that one job where it is, it's like, okay, I got to go back through and read a bunch of notes to be able to make this happen. So yeah, that, if you don't have a probe, get one, you caveman. And if you do, find a way to just make the full use of it. I'm not even using full use of it because we're not, I'm not doing full control of like just throw a part in the machine and let CAM, know where it is so it can pick up the part for me. I ain't got to that point yet. I'm working on it. You've been helping me with that, with the container method. Trying, keyword trying.
Well, it's a tough nut to crack. Like I'm struggling with a very similar thing switching over to Hypermill right now, where like you just don't have the time to be slow, and like I totally understand it. Like it's tough for sure. You want to be competent all the time, especially when you've been in this trade this long. Sitting there and like scratching your head, like how do I do this? It feels very uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's one challenge, or what is a challenge you're facing, and where are you looking for help?
Let me think about that a second. A lot of our challenges are internal. Things like ordering material and ordering tooling. The owner does that currently. And that can be difficult because a lot of times he's not here. He's in another state doing service work or something like that, or he's quoting or, whatever he might be doing. And that's definitely probably our biggest issue when we get work in. It can be a little hard to get material ordered, get it ordered the way we want it, and also be able to replenish tooling as we need to. Part of that's because of the state of the company, and I understand that. He's working on that. He's going to make it to where Mark can order, hopefully soon, because he is technically the shop manager. So, I mean, that's really all in his hands. Outside of that, well, just tooling in general. Like, we have mainly been using Haas tooling because it's easy to get, and that's kind of what they got into before I started here. I had never used Haas tooling up until here. And it's fine. It's all right for the price that it is. I feel like since I've had the whole like made in Korea versus made in Taiwan thing, I think they've had a lot of problems there. I've not been happy with their Taiwanese made in mills. But I have been really doing a lot of research trying to find the best bang for the buck. That's the key for me. I mean, a lot of guys just say, well, just go buy, buy everything helical, or buy everything from Frasia. Okay, I get it. I'd love to. And Frasia's not as bad, but like the cost is tough, especially when you're going from Haas tooling pricing to Frasia somewhat, helical certainly on their pricing. I know I can say that it's worth it. It's hard. The thing I struggle with, and I've struggled with for years, is how do I quantify that? How do I tell the owner, okay, I understand that it's hard to go from paying, say, $40 for an end mill to 80 or 100, or even from 50 to 80.
Right.
But here's how it's worth it. Without being able to actually do tests. And the thing is, when you're a piecework shop, you can't necessarily run, okay, this end mill ran 1,000 parts and this one ran 1,500.
Right. Yeah.
I could do that a little bit at my last job in some cases, but it's hard to do that when every part is different.
Oh yeah. It's even hard to track time in the cut, which would probably be an easier metric to compare as far as piecework goes. But even then, you're constantly setting and breaking stuff down and it's not the same tool. And you're like, I don't know when that one was used. And unless you want to spend the time to like attach a file to every tool and say like, oh, this is how long it's run. It's tough to do for sure.
Exactly. So, and I'll extend that to holders as well. I mean, holders, maybe even more so because, again, we have a lot of whoever the owner of this company is not a machinist. So he had someone else set it up when they actually got into machining. It didn't start out with machining capability at all. Then he wanted to get into making bender tooling. And obviously need machining for that. So they bought their VF4SS that they have now. A lot of the stuff they started with was like Amazon tooling. There's holders that I do not recognize. They're from who knows, somewhere in China. Taps to, a cheap tap is probably one of the most dangerous things in a shop from a parts perspective, at least.
100%.
And so, we mainly have ER32s, TG100s, ER16s. We have one welding holder in the shop. No. Two. Sorry, two. Let me be accurate. Big difference there. And I mean, I'm a welding holder guy. I don't mind them. I use them quite a bit at Gallions just because they're cheap and they're fairly effective if you're willing to replace them every so often. I would love to get into shrink fits. Again, you go from, especially with Haas tooling, you go from like a $30 ER32 to and maybe $10 for the collet to $150, $200 for a shrink fit plus, ideally maybe not a machine, but like Cameron's, like my co-host has showed me this little gun he's got. It's like a nut heater.
Yeah, bolt buster.
Yeah. And
that's what we used for a while.
Okay. And those things aren't cheap either. They're $150 or something. That's better than a $5,000 machine. But I know, especially since we do 5-axis work, that's where we need to go. I don't know that firsthand because I've never used shrink fit, but I know what I've heard, and I know. But again, justification is hard to come up with.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely tough, but I mean, I'm sure you're encountering reach issues on the 5-axis, and like that's the biggest thing that the shrink fits will help with for sure.
I mean, I had my first, if you want to call it a crash, the other day, and I
saw your post unfortunately this morning.
That's right. It was originally a story because I was kind of embarrassed, but I was like, you know what? No, I ain't gonna hide this. I'm gonna make it into a video. And yeah, I mean, I ran an ER32, and honestly, that was completely on me because the issue was I thought I had that tool set up as a 32 in CAM, and so I set it up as a 32. In reality, I actually, right now our Fusion library is just every single type of tool holder that like is in the Haas library. I had accidentally picked an ER25 holder by 4-inch gauge length. It cleared. But guess what? I don't have a 4-inch ER25.
Right.
I have a 32 or I have a 16. So, and yeah, I bumped the jaws on that vise. And I was terribly upset about that when it happened because we actually just got those new jaws like a month or month and a half ago. Because when I started, they were trashed. And not from Mark either. I mean, they were from whatever Yahoo was working on it before. Whatever knucklehead ordered a bunch of Amazon junk. So, we got new jaws, and then I've used them a bit, and I've put a beauty mark in them. It'll be fine. We can probably skim them a little bit to make it work, but it hurts a little bit. But it's definitely made me a little bit more careful about that. So, but I can tell using the 4-inch ER16. It's not ideal when you're trying to rough out tool steel.
Totally.
So,
yeah. Totally. Work-life balance. What does it mean to you, and how do you manage it? Is it any different from 5 or 10 years ago?
It's definitely different. Definitely different because 5 years ago, I mean, I was literally taking prints home from work and like for volume jobs and trying to study, okay, how can I make this more efficient? Or I even had, for the longest time, I had Fusion at home, just like whatever the free version is.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think of like, okay, what if we made a fixture plate for this machine, like with, like fifth axis stuff or quick change work holding, that kind of thing. I spent a lot of time that was completely unpaid. And that was, I'm not going to say it was a mistake. I definitely would not do that now, but I kind of am glad I looked into it when I did. I still catch myself thinking about it now, but it's mainly when I'm just looking on Instagram. I'm not really going out and searching for it, especially because I know my limitations here. The key to work-life balance is figuring out how much reward do you have to get from your job by doing that, by going above and beyond and working for free, essentially. And I unfortunately, I figured out that there really wasn't a reward, as far as, bonuses or whatever. So the only reward was my own satisfaction from being able to work on cool things.
Right.
And that's great. That's awesome, but that only goes so far. So yeah, I mean, now I'm more in a point where I work when I work. I work like heck when I'm here, but when the day's over, I go home and I try my hardest not to really think about it that much. It's not
Good.
The key is it's not my shop and it's never going to be my shop. So I kind of have to, and I have to force myself. I mean, we talked about this already. I have to force myself to think that way because it's just a trait that I have, I guess, that I try to act like it's mine, but I have to remember that it's not and it won't be.
Right. I mean, don't beat yourself up too much about caring.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like of all the flaws that we all have, caring about your job is by far a good bad one.
Absolutely. Far better than the opposite of not caring at all. I can't. I've met people like that. I can't stand it.
Yeah, exactly. Second to last, what thing that doesn't really pencil out have you bought that you wouldn't be without just to further reduced aggravation, fatigue, or aversion?
Oh, wow. Boy, that's a good one, Dylan. Well, I'm kind of cheating this one a little bit, I guess, but this job is the first experience I've been able to have with like 96 millimeter pattern, quick change work holding, raw clock bases or whatever Lang calls it, that kind of thing. And they are expensive. I mean, I looked at Lang when I was at Gallions. I looked at fifth axis. Never really could get them to. They bought one for the fourth axis they had, and we used it one time, and then it basically got locked down on one job. So we never got. We spent like $1,500 on this, big chuck to rotary adapter, and never really got to actually use it as intended. Since I've come here and we have a fifth axis rock lock on the fifth axis that we have, the TRT 160 or whatever it is. Even though that thing is, in my opinion, expensive, it's like $1,200-$1,300. I absolutely would not be without one. It's wonderful to be able to just quick change. We even, I mean, sometimes we run out of pins because we only have so many pins. Not that we have a lot of stuff that goes on it, but like, we have the self-centering vise that we use mainly. I made an adapter for a 3-jaw chuck a while back, so we can use 3-jaw on it. And then we have a custom fixture for holding bend dies and stuff for doing the tube groove. And that's basically all the pins that we have, right? So if we ever get into another fixture of some kind, we'll have to get more of those pins. It's well worth it because I have had to take all that off and then put something on it with nothing and spend 15, 20 minutes indicating it in, take it off, put the 5th axis plate on, spend 15, 20 minutes indicating that in. And I'm like, I understand that when you just, you know what, it kind of goes back to the justification thing. Just this, I look at it, I'm like, okay, if shop rate is whatever an hour, let's say it's $100 an hour or something. I get it. I spent 15 minutes, a half an hour doing it. That's $50, whatever, that versus a $1,200 plate. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. But you do that a couple times a week, maybe even a couple times a day. And then to me, there is a huge quality of life factor to it. To me, it would be frustrating if I had to go every other day and re-indicate a fixture on a machine, right? I can do it. I don't have a problem doing it. But to me, it's like, this is just a pointless waste of time for me. So yeah, I mean, definitely something like that. I mean, quick change work holding like that.
Totally. All right. Last up, what have you been researching this week? Doesn't have to be manufacturing related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
Okay. So I've got 3 for you. None of them are machining related. LVP flooring, because about 8 weeks, hopefully 8 weeks from now, I'm going to start putting flooring in my house. And LVP is what I'm going to go with. So I'm like, I probably need to brush up on this ahead of time. As evidenced by the fact I wanted to fully script our podcast, you can tell I like to prepare ahead of time. And I've got notes for this recording with you. So there's that, which it looks like it's going to be a breeze, and it's going to be fun to do. And then, I like to cook, right? I kind of started the #machinists who cook thing a few years ago, which kind of died out again. So I've been researching Instant Pot meals, because when you live in a camper, I should have done it when we moved in, the stupid thing, but we bought an Instant Pot a while ago, and it has made cooking easier. It's made it to where my wife can cook more instead of me having to work, come home, try to cook, whatever. So I've been researching Instant Pot meals and sheet pan meals for here.
Oh, nice.
When I started here, I told Mark, I was like, hey, they have a gas grill outside. So I was like, hey, I'll grill us lunch every now and then. That way we don't have to run out to get something, because every day he was running out to, wherever, Taco Bell or Hardee's or whatever. And I figured, for the health of both of us, I figured maybe I'll just cook for us. And the other guys too, the owner, whoever. And the problem with that is, they always show grilling is something you're supposed to do in summer, but I really don't want to be out there when it's 95 out, standing in front of a hot grill. Screw that.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So I've been looking at sheet pan meals, so we actually have a pretty nice kitchen here in the office.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
There's a stove or a range with an oven. I think it's even a convection oven. So I've been looking at, just different things I can cook there that I can throw it together, throw it in the oven for 20 minutes, continue working so I don't rack up like an hour-long lunch break, just trying to make us a healthy lunch.
You should check out Stealth Health Life on Instagram, stealth_health_life. The guy that has a full slow cooker cookbook that you can buy. And I think most of the recipes are also in the description of the videos, and they're quite good, I will say. They're fairly healthy as well. I mean, a lot of them, they have low cheese or low fat cheese and stuff, and I might swap in just normal cheese or whatever, but they're pretty quick to put together and very tasty.
I will look that up. What was the name of it?
Stealth_health_life.
Sweet. I wrote that down. I will definitely do that. Thank you, Dylan.
Of course. Yeah. And I think there was one other one that Fair Fit Eats is another one.
Okay.
He also does a bunch of one pan or slow cooker meals that are really tasty.
Awesome.
And then what's your last one?
That was it. It was those 3 things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Pat, thanks so much I'm glad we got to talk for so long. Thanks so much for all the time.
Yeah, I hope 2.5 hours wasn't too long, man.
No, the listeners love the long episodes, is what I've come to know.
Awesome.
Please promote, let us know where we can find you, all your socials, all that stuff.
Okay. Mainly on Instagram as at job_shopper_TN. I'm on LinkedIn. I really don't like LinkedIn that much, so I'm there, but probably won't see anything from me for a while. And of course, you can find me on YouTube. Every now and then, I'll do some stuff for Practical Machinists, so you can check out their channel. We've done a few collab videos with several of us in it. And of course, the Impractical Machinist podcast. That's on the Practical Machinist YouTube channel. You can also find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I do have a non-machining manufacturing related Instagram account called Pine Knot Homestead. It's just where I post my gardening, cooking, house building stuff. A little bit more of a personal twist on things.
Awesome. Well, everyone go check it out, and definitely check out the Impractical Machinists. I enjoy those episodes. You guys are every other week, right?
Correct. Yep.
Awesome.
Every other Tuesday.
Wonderful. Well, again, thanks so much for your time, Pat. I really appreciate it.
You bet, Dylan. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. And thanks to new Patreon members, Colton, Tim, and Chris. All of you Patreon members make the show possible. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.